How's it going, guys? Alright, so there's a bunch of stuff I didn't film. A lot of stuff I didn't film was cleaning parts because it's just kind of really boring. If you want to know what that looks like, you can probably just Google it and find it. I just decided to go ahead and omit that since this is technically like my third time building this engine. Doesn't really feel like filming all that stuff again. I really wasn't going to film a whole lot of the assembly, but I figure why not. So right now at the point that I'm at now. So yeah, I got the transit part down there. Block is obviously fully disassembled. Head sitting on the floor. That needs to go out to the machine shop. And then we got everything here on the table that's going back into the engine. Everything has gone through a preliminary cleaning, not a final cleaning, but just a get all the oil and gunk off. So now what I'm going to start doing is measuring the key components of the engine. And I'm not going to be as anal as I was last time. You know, last time I basically blueprinted the engine. I know this crank came out of a running engine that didn't have anything wrong with it, so I'm not really too concerned. I'm only measuring the crank again just for the sake of being able to figure out my bearing clearances. And technically I'm using the same type of bearings they are from a different batch, so they could be different, but usually they're not very different. So I mean, I could probably just throw this all together and everything would be fine, but I just want to have the peace of mind that all the clearances and everything is, you know, correct. And of course you could just use plastic gauge, but I'm going to go ahead and do it the semi-anal way. So what you're going to need here is a micrometer that reads way down 0, you know, or 1, whatever. So you're going to need to find out what your crank specs are supposed to be. So I already found that. I know that the rod pins are supposed to be between 1.7693 and 1.7669. Those are the specs. There is a outer round tolerance, but I'm not really concerned about that because I know it's fine. The main pins are 1.9661 to 1.9667. So I'm just going to go ahead and measure these up real quick and get a rough idea of what my pins are. You do not want to force these things because it does not take a lot to push them out of spec, out of tolerance. So if you're not familiar with these guys, so this row is going to be your first digit. Well, not your first digit after the decimal. So this is a 1-inch standard, 1 to 2 inch standard. So it's measured. It's 0 is 1 inch on this basically. So we know that the first digit is going to be 1. So we're going to do 1.7, and then you see there's a couple of marks there. So that's a 1/4 So 1.75. Then we go to this dial and line it up with this first line here. So it's that's going to be 19 because it's not quite to 20. So yeah, that's going to be 19. And then we line up the one that is the closest. It looks like that's going to be 4, possibly 3. It's reading 4. So do it real quick here. So it's going to be 1. What did I say? 7. I have to write it down. Actually, I already wrote it down once. I'm not good at math in my head. So yeah, we got our 1, 7, 5, 0, 1, 9, and the last digit was 4. So we just dropped it down. 4, 9, 6, 7, dot 1. So that didn't make any sense there. So like I said, our first measurement on the caliper was 7. Our second measurement was dot 0.05. And then our third measurement, dot 1.9. And our last measurement was dot 0.0004. So you add it all together, 1.7694. That's slightly larger than what the spec is supposed to be, which is a little bizarre, but that could just be user error. I could be measuring that slightly wrong. In fact, let me double check, make sure that we are in fact reading correct, because we could be off a little bit. Alright, so now we're all lined up. Let's measure everything again. So everything is the same. We're gonna go 691. It looked like the 9 was more lined up, but it actually looks like the 1 is the closest to being lined up. So we'll go 691 because that makes a lot more sense. So our first measurement is 1.7 691. We're going to do a little. So anyways, I'm just going to continue this, measure all the pins, and we'll come back once I'm done. Alright, so got the journals all, or the pins all measured. I didn't really do a XYZ on the mains, I just checked it with the gauge really quick, because like I said, I'm not going to be super anal. I realize that you don't really have to be that anal. I mean, I don't know, I'm sure there's people that will argue that you should, that like in order to build a high horsepower engine, everything has to be perfect. I disagree. So, anyways, I just made sure the pins are round. They're all fairly close. There's nothing larger than these sizes, so that's the important thing. So 1.9661, 1.9662 across the board for the main bearing pins, and 1.7691 to 1.694 for the other pins. This one might actually be 4. I might have just measured out a little wrong. But anyways, they're all within spec, or they're all within tolerance. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to install bearings into the rods, and then eventually install bearings into the crank, into the block, and then I will measure the inside diameter of those. So. So once these bearings go into these rods, you cannot switch these bearings to other rods. They have to stay with these rods. I grabbed the wrong fucking thing. Because the bearing will deform slightly once it's torqued down and all that jazz. So it's important to keep everything the same. Also, you want to make sure you don't mix up your caps. One of the nice things about these Maxspeedingrods rods, which I did not expect, was that each rod and cap is serialized, so you cannot mix them up, which is really great. I actually really appreciate that. As like, I don't know, it's the little things like that. And of course, you can't flip the rod, you can't flip the cap around and mix that up. And, you know, so it's just great that that's done. All rods should have that. Bearings are identical, there is no top or bottom. Like I said, once these are installed and the caps are torqued, the rods almost, the bearings almost, they make an impression almost into the rod. And they become one. And so you really shouldn't swap them. Like I said, I've used these bearings. I haven't used these rods, so it is good that I measure the measured these rods, because unfortunately I don't have any lube. So I don't think I'm going to torque these down all the way. I know I should. But I don't have the proper ARP lube right now. So this will all come apart again and get cleaned before final assembly. Make sure there's nothing behind those bearings. Actually, I guess I should probably do that now before I measure, but everything just came out of the plastic. It should all be fairly spotless. When you take your measurements, make sure your rod is actually torqued down to the right spec, and let me show you why. So if you measure one, here's a rod that hasn't been torqued down, and the measurement that I get, the clearance that I get is about 3.5, 0.0035, which is like massive. Would be basically unusable. But here's one that's been torqued down, and we have 0.0015. So it's a big difference. It's very important. Torque them all down. Make sure that they're at the right spec. So yeah, just went ahead and torque this one down. I don't think I torqued it down properly because we're at 2. I'm going to re-torque this one. Yeah, alright, 0.002 on that one. That one's 1.5. So what I'm going to do here, A, B, C, D. So the reason why I did A, B, C, D instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 is because I'm going to determine which pins have the largest diameter versus which bearings have the biggest clearance. So that way I can match the rods to kind of try and balance out the clearances, even though they're all pretty much about the same. They're all based on one. So this is 0.0015, 0.0002. No, wait, 0.02. There's going to be some pretty wide clearances again. So the spec is .008 to .0014. So these two are really close. these two are kind of wide. Now I don't mind. Now the max is not 004, so the fact that we're at 002 isn't too horrible. It's about what it was before. I think it was like 0025 across the board on all the clearances. So a little tighter clearances. So like I said, this one will probably go to 1. Yeah, they're all 004, so yeah, that one's the tightest, so we'll put one of those at 1, and then, yeah. So next is going to be putting the main bearings into the block, getting that torqued down, and measuring those guys. I've already showed it once. I don't do a very good explanation of this. So what you want to do here, you take your micrometer, you set it to the width or the size of your crank journal or your rod journal or whichever thing you happen to be measuring, and you set your micrometer to that. So write those settings down so that you can repeat them later. And so that now that that is set to, and I've got it set to the size of the largest journal, which is 1.9661 or 662, I think. 1.9662. This is the right size tip, maybe. Yep. Alright. So what you're going to see here is to zero your gauge here. So you're going to see it. So I did a poor job of explaining this live. What you have to do to zero the gauge is rock it back and forward. You will notice the number climb then fall. The number at which it stops climbing is your 0. 173, 175. It should start going down. So it's looking like 176, 175. 175 might be 0. So that should be 0. There we go. Jesus Christ. Now that this is zeroed, this will basically tell us how much larger this hole is than the crank pin. And of course I have this aligned in an awkward, horrible way. Well, the most I can read on that is 0025. It's probably better, but I can't get this in a good position. So we'll go ahead, we'll try the next set. Hopefully I can get in there well enough. Sucks because I can't get in there that way. And it's going to be the same problem. I won't be able to get a good read. Check something out here. We're stuck at 1.3. I don't think it's really .003 because I can't move the gauge down far enough. So oh, maybe they are .3. I'm getting like .025. Yeah. So we're looking at a .0025. A little on the wide side. .0025. 0.025. So that's all pretty consistent. I'm going to recheck my calipers. Make sure I'm zeroed right. Oops. So I'm going to say they're all between 002 and 0025. Probably closer to 002. She's a little wide, but I think that might just be the way these ACL bearings work. But yeah, she definitely seems a little wide. Because my crank is on the larger end of the scale as far as being in spec. These bearings are pretty wide. I was going to call it a night, but since I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and check the ring gap. So the pistons are used. They should already be pre-gapped for the most part, but I just want to double check because my block might be tighter. Might be looser. Who knows? So we'll do that real quick. Alright, so checking ring gap, pretty simple. Take a ring, shove her in the hole, take a piston, push it down about midway-ish. Take your filler gauge. So I'm going for a 21 top ring, 23 second ring. That's 0.021 inch. Well, she might be a little tighter than that. I hate these things. She's about 20 top ring. I'll try it in each hole. It's probably about 21. It's probably like 22. Wow, okay. So anyways, I'm just going to go through each set and I'll get back to you with what I find out. Alright, so I just about got it where it should be. 21 top ring, 24 to 23 bottom ring. I'll probably grind the other two rings to make them match. Number 4 is a little wider than I guess, or the rings are just gap. But anyways, I have a fresh set of rings. I'm just going to gap for number 4. So I'm in the process of doing that now. Trying to get this guy to 21. But when I say 21, I mean .021 of an inch. So I got my little tool here. Slow and steady wins the race. You don't want to take off too much at a time. There we go. 21. Perfect. We got our fresh bottom ring. We're going to go for 24. Now it's at 21. Might already be pretty close. It's already pretty close. You can squeeze a filler in there. This one may not take a whole lot. It's definitely a lot easier if you bolt that thing down to a bench. Alright, so all the rings are gapped. Went ahead and went with a 21 top ring, or .021 top ring, .024 bottom ring. Kind of wide, but I plan on shoving a ton of boost down this thing, so rather err on the larger side than on the smaller side, because the last thing you want is for those ring ends to touch. Bad time for everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and put the rings on the pistons, put the rods on the onto the pistons and all that stuff, and get a complete assembly. And I'm going to weigh everything and see how close everything is to balanced. This guy might need some new batteries. So I'm just going to drop this clip in here. $9.70. $9.70. So this one seems like it might be a little high. Now we'll just go with 970. It's probably a tad bit over, but it's not worth me grinding away at the rod or piston to get the weight down to match. That seems to be pretty good. Room and never find it again. So yeah, I think at this point we are just about ready to clean everything a final time and start throwing stuff into the block. So yeah, I think we're ready. Everything measures out great, actually. I mean, it's all exactly like the old rods. I actually had no offense to the KA rods. They're great rods. But the last setup, and it could have been the pistons, who knows. But anyways, the last setup I had to actually grind some material away from the rods. Actually, it might have been from the pistons. I can't remember where I took the material away from. But I had to take some material out in order to evenly to get everything to weigh the same. So the importance of everything weighing the same is it's how the engine is balanced. So the crank, for the most part, is already balanced. It doesn't hurt to get it checked out and make sure it's balanced, but from the factory it should be balanced. In fact, if you look at it, so if you look at it and you see these little dimples here, that's where they've taken away material to balance the crank. So you could take it someplace, make sure it's balanced, or make sure it's balance it more, because I don't know to what degree it's balanced. But you know, hey, get out of my chair, my guy. Bro, come on. Freaking cat. So anyways, yeah, so I mean, you have to figure it's balanced enough to go 200,000 miles on under normal conditions. So it's probably balanced well enough. So anytime you change anything in that rotating assembly, pistons, rods, rings, all that stuff like that, you want to make sure that everything weighs exactly the same. So then that way you can maintain the balance of the rotating assembly. But yeah, so I mean, it's something great to say about the Maxspeedingrods, the Maxspeedingrods Max rods, whatever. They're well balanced. In fact, if you look at my other video when I got the rods, I weighed them, and the rods themselves are perfect. They are perfectly balanced. So yeah, looking forward to this. I think it's about it for now, other than the other stuff I mentioned. I gotta take the head out to the machine shop, and I gotta get some transmission parts. But after I spray everything down and clean everything really good, I'll clean this whole work area up again, and we can start replacing. We can start putting the rotating assembly back inside this block. So, till next time.